The title of this video series is Critical Thinking About Science. Before we go any further into the science part, I think we need to spend some time on the critical thinking part. We need to have an idea of what it means to think critically about science. And to do that, we need to first have some idea of what it means to think critically about anything. So in the next few episodes, I want to talk about what critical thinking is, and maybe dispel some myths about critical thinking and how it should be taught. Then we can start thinking about critical thinking in specific contexts, including science. So, to set up this discussion, I want to share a definition of the aims of critical thinking that I find to be very helpful. I once heard an author describe critical thinking as the art of being right. Now, that answer makes me smile. It's wonderfully cocky, but it does capture something important. It expresses the idea that an important goal of critical thinking isn't just to be able to argue and reason about a subject in a skillful way. Your goal is to get the right answer, to make the right choice, to make the correct judgment. I summarize the point this way. One of the aims of critical thinking is to improve the quality of our beliefs, judgments, and decisions. This little slogan is useful because it can be unpacked in various ways by expanding on what we mean by these terms. What is a belief? What is a judgment? What is a decision? And what do we mean by quality? In what ways can a belief or a judgment or a decision be good or bad, better or worse, higher quality or lower quality? Well, one way that a belief can be good or bad is if it's more or less accurate or more or less true to the facts. But we don't judge decisions on whether they're true or false. That's the wrong concept. Decisions can be smart or dumb, effective or ineffective, rational or irrational, but not true or false. I decided to bring an umbrella to work today based on the weather report this morning. Is that decision true or false? The question makes no sense. So we need to spend some time thinking about ways that beliefs, judgments, and decisions can be good or bad. It doesn't have to be a lot of time. You don't have to write a philosophy dissertation on them. But these concepts are to critical thinking what concepts like theory, observation, and experiment are to science. It's easy to pass over them because the concepts seem obvious and simple. Now, before we start expanding on this slogan, I want to introduce another aim or goal of critical thinking that I think is distinct from the goal of improving the quality of our beliefs, judgments, and decisions. This is the goal expressed by phrases like learning to think for yourself. I want to teach my kid how to think for him or herself. I want to be an independent thinker. We say this, but what do these phrases really mean? Well, I think first and foremost, they express values, things we care about. They express the value of freedom of thought. They express the value of autonomy, the ability to make decisions for ourselves and pursue our own goals. They express the values of agency and responsibility, the notion that as individuals, we want to claim authorship and ownership of our own beliefs and values. We don't want to think of ourselves as mindlessly parroting what we've been told to believe by governments, corporations, the media, religion, our peers, and so on. These values are often associated with the aims of critical thinking, and I think they should be. I summarize them like this. Another important aim of critical thinking is to learn to think for ourselves, to be able to claim ownership and responsibility for our beliefs, judgments, and decisions. So, our compact definition of the aims of critical thinking has these two components. They both use terms that are open to interpretation and debate, but that's okay, because they invite questions that are foundational for critical thinking, and that makes them useful. For example, you might naturally wonder how we should make judgments about number 2. When can I claim ownership of a belief or a decision? What are the criteria for a belief or a judgment that you can truly claim as your own, and that isn't just a product of your childhood conditioning, or the media, or echoing the views of persuasive people who you happen to admire? Or maybe this notion of ownership is always just a matter of degree. But how do you measure distance along the scale? And what determines where a given belief or judgment is located on that scale? And what's the connection between the aims expressed in 1 and the aims expressed in 2? If our judgments are high quality, does that automatically make them the sort of thing that we can claim responsibility for? Now, these are all good questions. They intersect with questions that philosophers have asked for many years. You can go deep on these, and as a philosopher, I'm happy to indulge that urge, but as a critical thinking educator trying to create a resource that is useful for the public, I think it's important to keep the discussion focused on questions that can actually help us improve our critical thinking. So to that end, I want to move on to talk about the concepts raised in number 1. What is a belief? What is a judgment? What is a decision? And in what senses can we evaluate these as good or bad, high quality or low quality? Afterward, what I'm going to do is apply what we've learned about these concepts to identify some common myths or misconceptions about critical thinking.